2022, the Spanish far-right political party Vox produced a feature-length film for Viva 22, a rally for the party's parliamentary campaign. The film promoted the president of Vox, Santiago Abascal, by linking his campaign to the histories of Spanish Christian glory. Appropriating The Princess Bride, the film begins with an abuelo reading an old book to his grandson about the history of Spain, the history we made together.
Hispania era una tierra que los pueblos del Mediterráneo, los del norte de África y hasta los germánicos querían conquistar. Pero todos, hasta los árabes, acababan troceados en reinos pequeños. Y entonces llegó...
Déjame adivinar, don Pelayo.
La cruz, la fe cristiana. Los pueblos del norte de Hispania se hicieron cristianos y luego católicos. Y en la batalla de Covadonga combatieron a los musulmanes bajo un solo símbolo, el de la cruz de la victoria.
¿Y qué pasó con toda esa gente?
8 siglos costó echarlos. 8 siglos de grandes señores, caballeros, reyes, hombres sabios, guerreros y batallas. Don Pelayo, el Cid, Jaime I, Alfonso IX.
Introducing the boy to the great heroes of Spain, he offers him an opportunity. Would you like to meet them? The boy then hops out of bed and joins the grandfather at the main stage of Viva 22, where he then leads the aforementioned Christian warriors in a charge against Muslims invaders. A LARP of white supremacy leading into this rally speech from Santiago Abascal. This performance connects the mythologized past of Spanish Christian glory directly to the contemporary political movement of Spain's far right. This discourse is not isolated to Viva 22 and is in fact at the center of political discourse for Vox and far-right parties throughout Europe. Don Pelayo, Ferdinand and Isabella, and the other Christian heroes mythologized by the far right are the same leaders who fought against Muslims in medieval Iberia, expelled Jews in 1492, and forced Muslims to convert to Catholicism. In my classroom, we closely examine these histories not only to understand present claims about the past, but as tools to counter them. It is important for students to understand the history of race-making so that they can disentangle themselves from the rhetoric of extremism. The mass conversion of Jews after the 1391 pogroms and the forced conversion of Muslims beginning in 1501 disrupted the delicate balance of apparent religious tolerance in the Iberian Peninsula. These conversions theoretically opened possibilities for Jews and Muslims to gain positions of power that had up to then been inaccessible, but these new converts were in direct competition with established Christians. In this context of competition, processes of racialization were intimately tied to the management of religious minorities. My students study the institutions, practices, and vocabularies that defined and measured different degrees of belonging. Terms like raza, linaje, nación, and casta were linked to notions of descent that harked back to the processes of mass conversions. The key categories of exclusionary practices tied moral, religious, and cultural traits to genealogies inherited through blood. The word raza, a term that entered into common usage in the late 15th century, was originally associated with animal breeding. But by the early 17th century, Sebastián de Covarrubias, the man responsible for an early Spanish dictionary, defined race as related to lineage. It is understood as having a negative connotation, such as having some race of Moor or Jew. Race was intimately linked to religion and blood, specifically to Muslim and Jewish blood. Race became a stain in one's ancestry. Covarrubias associated race with the term casta. There could be superior casta and bad casta, which indicated an inferior lineage. Someone with superior casta could trace his or her descent through strictly Christian lines, or in the vocabulary of that time, an Old Christian. A bad casta, on the other hand, was a lineage that was tainted by a Muslim or Jewish ancestor, a New Christian. In this tension between Old and New Christians, racial discrimination became codified in legislation that targeted both Jews and Muslims, and the new social element, converts. The famous Sentencia Statuto of Toledo of 1449, or Statutes of Purity of Blood, is one of the earliest documents that makes reference to Jewish blood, and it sets the parameters for boundary formation between different kinds of Christians. The statute presents the vocabularies of race as a set of binaries that juxtaposed new Christians and the Cristianos viejos lindos, or pure or clean old Christians. The conversos are bad Christians who by their very nature are enemies of the said city and of the old Christians living in it. This impurity made them incapable and untrustworthy to hold public or private office in the said city of Toledo and its lands. New race-making vocabularies and practices responded to Christian anxieties over social control and the preservation of status and power in the post-conversion Iberian world. The glorification of Spain's heroes, the protectors of Christian purity, by the far right in Spain is no coincidence. Much like the mythologized Spaniards of the past, the Santiago Abascals of the world are sowing division by stoking the same anxieties of social control and the preservation of status. Peddling an anti-Muslim, anti-immigration, and white nationalist rhetoric, the far-right movement in Spain touts this past as a paragon of Spanish glory. The idolization of Spanish history is inherently tied to a legacy of racialization and institutionalized racism that persists today.